Hey guys, I used to see tissue box covers made with this material in classrooms when I was little. I never knew what they were called until I came across them on Amazon. They are plastic canvas sheets. I got a 12-piece set to make a couple of bins for my shelf. I also used a tapestry needle and this type of yarn, but in the colors cream and black. Other types of yarn should also work. First, I cut the tag off and cut out my pieces. Make sure that when you cut the canvas, the edges are smooth. I used a diamond pattern for the bigger bin. I placed my needle at the center and moved it 5 squares over to where the start of the diamond would be. This is just to have an even pattern from the center. I could have just started from the end. Bring your needle up through the canvas and to the square below it. Then go to the next column and 1 square above the previous column. While doing this, cover the extra yarn in the back. Continue the pattern. When I reached the edge, I noticed that the last column wasn't covered in the back. So I brought the needle up 1 square below the top of the column and covered a square. Tuck it under the wrap columns and cut the extra yarn. I did this at the end of each row. Whenever I started a row, I would bring the needle to the 3rd square above the previous row cover the square below it, and go to the square at the top of the pattern. Then cover the column. To connect it to the other part, since it was just 1 square, I overlapped it and tucked the extra yarn in the back. Then continue the pattern. When I ran out of yarn within the row, I placed the needle at the start of the next column and covered one square. Then with another piece of yarn, I covered a square next to it. Continue the pattern while covering the extra yarn in the back. Cover the 4 side pieces and the base. With the back spacing in, join the side pieces at the base with an overcast stitch. To do this, start between the 2 sheets. Bring the needle through a square of one canvas over the edge of both canvases and through the next square of both canvases. Repeat this for the rest of the row. Then connect the sides. This bin wasn't as stiff as I wanted it to be. I think part of the reason was because the yarn that wrapped around the canvas went with the grid. Also, the bin was bigger than the next bin that I made. The smaller bin seemed more rigid because the diagonal pattern went against the grid. So to make this bin more sturdy, I added strips to the sides. I wrapped the canvas at a diagonal and used an overcast stitch at the bottom of each piece. Then join the 4 pieces. Align them with the sides and stitch them together using an overcast stitch. To hold down the bottom of the strips, I stitch the 2 layers together at every other 1 square part. Tuck in the end and cut the excess yarn. For the smaller bin, I cut 2 pieces at 7 by 5 inches, 2 pieces at 8.5 by 5 inches, and 1 piece at 8.5 by 7 inches. I use a diagonal square pattern. Again, I place my needle at the center. I moved it over 4 squares to where a diagonal square would start. I started with black yarn, but you couldn't really see what I was doing, so I demonstrated it with a cream yarn. Bring your needle up through the canvas. Then go 1 column over and 1 row up. Continue the pattern while covering the extra yarn in the back. When starting a new diagonal square, I went 1 square over, wrapped a square, went down the column, and started the diagonal square pattern again. This way the yarn in the back won't be in the way. Go to the top of the diagonal for the next row and continue the pattern. Whenever I was about to run out of yarn, I would go to the next square and cover it. Then with another piece of yarn, I would start from that square. For the last square, I just stuck the yarn under the square diagonally across it. Join the sides to the base. Then join the sides together. Add an overcast stitch around the top. I didn't add strips to the top for this one, since it seems sturdier than the first bin. And here's how they turned out.